that they can decrease the overall volatility, but they also tend to slightly decrease the overall return. But it's a nice mix. It's something to augment your U.S. stock market returns. We also have another class that I like to use called REITs, Real Estate Investment Trusts. We've talked about many times, do not buy non-traded REITs. You want a traded mutual fund so you can get in and out if you so desire. And all of these things tend to make 8, 9, 10, 11% per year on average in the long run, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. But if you are in retirement or getting close to retirement, you don't want all of your money to be subject to such dramatic swings that we can have like 2008, where the U.S. stock market went down 37%. Because if all of your money was in the stock market and it went down 37%, and you want to take money out, you are now quintessentially selling low. You don't want to do that. So you'll have to have some money that is safer. The problem with the cushion is that it creates a drag on your overall portfolio. So what I tell people is you want the cushion to be as big as necessary, but as small as possible. You can go on all kinds of websites and say, what percentage should I have in bonds? And they'll give you a number. Unfortunately, I think that's like a broken analog clock. It can be right sometimes, but it's going to be wrong for you most of the time, and you're not going to know if it's right for you or wrong for you. So now you've achieved nothing other than getting an arbitrary number. So I wanted to kind of give you an outline of what it might look like today for somebody. And I'm going to take a person that is currently in retirement. They're just starting retirement, and they have $1 million. And from that $1 million, you can generally pull out 5%. Is the guideline. 4% is clearly a safer number. Any number lower than that, even more safe. It kind of goes with the mathematics. Higher than that, you start to pick up a little bit of risk. For some people, 6% is doable. And I say for some people because there's variables that go into effect. If you are 80 and you're starting retirement, taking out 6%, you're never going to outlive your money. It's just not going to happen. If you're retiring at 55, taking out 6% starts to get pretty scary for me, because if the market takes a big downswing and you end up needing more money than you thought, you can have a compounded problem. But we're going to look at a couple that's retiring somewhere in 62 or 65 years of age. They've got their Social Security, and from this $1 million, they're going to take out $50,000, and maybe altogether their budget is $100,000 a year in retirement. Now, you can have less money in the cushion if, for example, you could say, well, if the market goes down a whole lot, I could live on $80,000 instead of $100,000. You could reduce the amount of money you take out of your portfolio. Therefore, a smaller amount would need to be in the cushion. If you are absolutely certain that you must have $100,000 a year, well, then the cushion would need to be a little bit bigger for you. So that is some of the flexibilities. If you retire from your main job but work part-time, that of course can change all these calculations. That's why it's so personal, and just putting your age into a calculator online is not going to be good enough. So in my example here, it's a couple with a $1 million portfolio, and we're going to assume that they can reasonably pull out $50,000, and that's going to be enough to make their budget balance, their spending, and that's why they retired. So the question is, how much do you want in the cushion? What percentage is the right percentage? Ignoring all of the stuff I just talked about it's different for you, I do not measure the cushion as a percentage or an absolute dollar amount, although that's easily calculatable. I want to measure the cushion in years. So the amount of money that you need to take out to balance your budget, that money should be sufficiently large enough that it will last for a decade. And the reason we want it to last for a decade is, again, based on historical data, and this is part of the science-based investing. We have these numbers, but the vast majority of the people in the industry don't know them because they're not paid to know things. They're paid to sell things. So what you need, if you have this safer investment that lasts you a decade, based on the historical data, because I don't know the future data. Based on historical data, you have a 94% probability of the market going up over a decade. So we've covered 94% probability of a big down market. The other 6%, you can reduce that or eliminate it if you go out to a cushion that's longer, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 years. But the bigger the cushion, the bigger the drag on your overall performance, which means instead of making closer to 10, you're going to make lower, whether it's 9, 8, 7, 6. So in the long run, you end up with less money. And depending on your personal goals, that's something we could consider. In the 6% of the cases where the market is down, it's usually only a few percentage points, 5 or 6. The worst case in the last 47 years in the United States stock market, after 10 years, is down 13%. Not fantastic, but that's one time, maybe 2 times out of 47 years. So if you invest at the wrong time or you retire at the wrong time, that might cause a little bit of a crimp in your style, and you might have to adjust a little bit. But it's all about this balance of trying to get the most safety that you need and the best return that you can get. So the other thing to keep in mind is that while you're invested still, in my opinion, primarily in stocks and stock mutual funds, and specifically index funds, which are a type of mutual fund, they pay dividends. Right now, the U.S. stock market is paying over 2% dividend. I think it's about 2.2 or 2.3. So if you needed $50,000 out of this account, or actually, if you only needed $23,000 out of this account, all of your money, virtually all of your money, could be in the stock market if you're okay with the volatility, which you might not be. But that's the math can be different than your opinion, and that's what we've got to take into consideration designing your specific plan. But assuming you want to have the cushion to be more safe and you need all $50,000, you have the cash flow that will last you the decade includes the dividends from your stock, the dividends from the bonds that you own, and revenue that you can generate by selling the bonds that you own. And often people try to create portfolios that they live on only the dividends. That's okay if you only need 2 or 3%. If you want to get to 4%, you have to start taking on riskier bonds because stocks aren't going to do it. Then you have problems with volatility there. So I try to look at it as what are the dividends, the yields that I'm going to make, and then what else do I need to sell? So if you have a year, I think it was 2012 or 2013, where the U.S. stock market went up 32%, you don't sell bonds that year. You sell a little bit of the stock. Matter of fact, you can sell a little bit of the stock, and then you can take another 5 or 10% out of your stock portfolio and make the cushion a little bit bigger because the year was probably too good for its own good. And you rebalance that way. And your cushion can grow more than you need, or the stocks can keep growing. And we can have that discussion on a regular basis. And so with all those sources of income in this theoretical scenario, this potential customer needs about $290,000 in the cushion. So it's about a third, well, less than a third, 30%, 29% of their total portfolio is conservatively invested in bonds. I also often have someone who's in retirement, a portion of their money, at least currently, in international bonds because they pay a higher rate, and there's risks and consequences with that as well as with anything. If you do have an international bond fund, you must make absolutely sure that it is continually adjusted against the U.S. dollar. Otherwise, you're doing a currency play. So you don't want to make 6% in your international bond fund and have the dollar go up 20%. Now you just lost 14. So the currency rate fluctuations are more important than the bond rate returns, which is not what you were going for. So all of that put together, this couple needs $290,000 in a basket of different types of bonds. We have short-term bonds, we have Ginnie Maes, we have a little bit of high yield, also known as junk bonds. And what that is invested in varies over time depending on the economic situation and depending on interest rates. Back in 2007, you could have a long-term bond portfolio that might have paid 6 or 7%. Well, if you're getting 6 or 7% instead of 2 or 3%, clearly you need less money in bonds because they're paying a higher dividend. So all of this is adjusted. And so that might be this one theoretical example for one couple that needs $50,000 out of $1 million. I picked $1 million because you can scale it up or down on your own personal situation. When you start approaching retirement, about 10 to 12 years before retirement, you start growing the cushion in a prorated manner. You can do that with the dividends and the yields that you're getting from the stocks, and you don't reinvest them back into the stock index funds. You put them in the bond index funds. If you have a particular position that grew a whole lot, especially if it's in an IRA or a Roth IRA, it doesn't matter that you sell it. There's no tax consequences. Or, hopefully, you are still adding new money every year, and so the new money gets added to the cushion, the more conservative position, while you allow the stocks to keep growing towards retirement. And you just slowly, gradually adjust it, because what you don't want to have happen, and I knew many people that this happened to, in 2007, someone might say, I'm only 2 or 3 years from retirement, and I've got enough money, and everything's great. Well, in 2008 happens, and they lose 37%. Or at least the market went down 37%. A lot of people lost between 40 and 50%. They suddenly look at that and say, I now have to work 7 to 10 more years just to get even. Well, you didn't have a cushion. You had all of your money in the U.S. stock market or in stocks in general around the world, and when there's a big recession, you're going to get wiped out. That's fine when you've got 30 or 40 years to go, but it's not fine when you have 2 freaking years until you want to stop working. You must build a safer position, and it's a delicate balance, in my opinion, of how you do that. So I've carried on with that long enough, but that's how we do the discussion. So we're going to go into our little commercial break, and we're going to come back and talk to Matt Dillahunty.
Here's an excerpt from Nailed by David Fitzgerald.
Didn't there have to have been a Jesus? Perhaps he was just a wandering teacher or an exorcist, an apocalyptic prophet or a zealot who opposed the Romans. Perhaps he was all these things, or even a composite of several such early first-century figures. But at any rate, surely there had to be somebody at the original core of Christianity, arguably the most famous individual in human history. All this seems to be a perfectly reasonable, completely natural assumption to make, so why would anyone be so foolish as to propose that Jesus never existed? Doesn't it just make more sense to assume that there was a historical Jesus, even if we're unable to recover the real facts about his life and death? As it turns out, no. The opposite is true. The closer we look at the evidence for Jesus, the less solid evidence we find, and the more we find suspicious silences and curious resemblances to the pagan and Jewish religious ideas and philosophies that preceded Christianity. And once you begin to parse out the origins of this tradition or that teaching from their various sources, the sweater begins unraveling quickly until it becomes very difficult to buy that there ever was, or even could have been, any historical figure at the center.
Nailed by David Fitzgerald is now available at atheistaudioBooks.com.
Only on Secular Media Network.
All right, everybody, welcome back. You are, of course, listening to the cleverly titled Phil Ferguson Show. I have with me today a longtime friend and a relatively well-known up-and-comer, I think that's fair to say, Matt Dillahunty. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, and I'm happy to be on this cleverly named program.
Well, you know who named this cleverly titled program?
I was going to guess that it was Phil Ferguson.
It was not Phil Ferguson.
Oh, my goodness.
David Smalley came up with the name. Because
he's known for his creativity.
He is. He's a marketing whiz.
And I think it's probably genius.
Well, it was funny because he was actually the one who encouraged me to come back, because I've had 2 different podcasts in the past, and he suggested this show title, and there was this big pause after he suggested it, and he's like, you don't like it? And I go, oh, I think I like it too much. And he goes, what do you mean? And I go, well, when you said it, part of me was like, yes, that's awesome. And I said, but when I like something too much, my skepticism kicks in and says, no, wait a minute. I have to pause and think about this some more to see if I'm missing the less obvious problems with this.
Yeah, I'm not good at actually naming things. I'm not the one who named The Atheist Experience, the TV show that we do here in Austin. Somebody else named that years ago. But it didn't matter what, whether I'm playing like a role-playing game with somebody or coming up with